Hello, my name is Father Edward Looney, and you're listening to the podcast How They Love Mary, a podcast that I hope will either be the beginning or the deepening of your Marian devotion. One of the ways that people have grown in their Marian devotion over the years is especially through novenas. I know of many saints, especially in my book, How They Love Mary, that they prayed a novena. One that comes immediately to mind is Blessed Solanus Casey, praying a novena to the Immaculate Conception for his vocation. Lots of people, maybe as they want to grow in their devotion to the rosary, might begin praying a 54-day rosary novena. And so they pray 9 days and they pray for 54 days then. So taking it in that sequence, 3 sets in petition, 3 sets in thanksgiving. And maybe for the non-rosary daily prayer, that's how they begin praying the rosary every day. So novenas have been a powerful way to grow in Marian devotion. So today I want to talk about a very unique novena. I've never heard of it actually until just a week or two ago. And I thought, well, I've never heard of it, so let's help other people learn about it too. I found out about it through Instagram. Actually, someone had posted it to their stories because I hadn't even followed this page yet. But then I did a little digging. I'm like, I want to know more. What is this? Maybe I should do this. And so that led me to the Instagram page, Miraculous Revival. And today I'm speaking with the person behind that Instagram page, Ellie, and we're going to be talking about the Impossible Novena. So thanks so much, Ellie, for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting because that one person posted it to their story. And so then I think I even wrote them and I said, hey, thanks for sharing this. I just signed up. And then somehow we got in touch. It said that you mentioned me in your story first. I'm looking at the sequence here. Well, that was in February 16th. So you had seen something I posted, apparently. You posted to your story. But then March 10th, you wrote me and you said, hi, Father. I'm honored that you are following along and that you have signed up to do the Impossible Novena. By chance, have you done it before? The answer, no. I have felt the nudge to reach out to you for some time this year, but I know you are so busy. We are covering Marian apparitions this year on our page, and I always think of how much you've helped me on my journey with your podcast and books. I just want to say thank you for everything, and I'm honored that you'll be joining our community this year for the Walk of the Incarnation. So I guess personally, I'm a little curious because even as we started today, you said something like, oh, this is so surreal. I've heard your voice for years. And so now here we are, and we're speaking and sharing and talking about what you're doing, which I love. And so first, how did you come to find out about the work that I've done, I guess?
Well, I guess I'll start out by saying that pretty much everything in my testimony comes through my mom, my biological earthly mother, and my heavenly mother. The two are very interconnected. And so when I first had my spiritual conversion, I was kind of coming into the faith. My mom, your podcast was the first podcast that I encountered, the first Catholic podcast that I encountered.
You mean the How They Love Mary podcast?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
crazy. Okay.
Yeah. And so my mom has been with you for years listening to you. And it's
Oh,
actually
wow.
my mom that this ministry was even born, my ministry. So she was sending me, you should listen to this one, listen to this one. And I would just, okay. And I would listen. And then I ended up, subscribing to your podcast. And then as I was doing laundry and doing different things, I would just listen to you. And as you hear more about my story, I mean, I really didn't know much about Mary at all. I didn't know much about anything when I first came into the faith a couple years ago. And so it feels so surreal to be here talking with you and hearing your voice as I'm watching you speak, as opposed to listening to your voice while I'm doing dishes,
Sure. That's pretty crazy because I do a lot of work with relevant radio. So I thought maybe you listen to the mass on relevant radio and that's how maybe you heard my voice for so long. I didn't actually realize it was this very podcast that now you've gone from a listener to actually being a guest. So this is wonderful. And yeah, that's great. And yeah, I'm very honored by that, because that doesn't happen all that often, to have a conversation with someone, maybe a parishioner. I talk to parishioners who listen, but to have someone, that kind of, our paths just have crossed over this project now that you are embarking on. So wonderful to hear that. And yeah, great to be able to meet with you and to talk today. So you mentioned a little bit about coming into the faith. So a few years ago, entering the church. So that's a story of conversion. I'm assuming that probably took place through the RCIA process, probably, in which you make a profession of faith. I'm assuming you were baptized already, but anyways, yeah, what brought you to the Catholic Church then? So you were practicing some religion, and then obviously something unsettled you there, and you're like, well, I think there's something more, and it's the Catholic faith that you were desiring. I think a lot of times we hear some of these converts, and some of them, they always say it was the church fathers I was reading. That's a common answer, but I'm interested in what drew you to the Catholic Church.
Well, I'm laughing because I'm about to basically tell you everything that you didn't just say.
Okay.
I didn't want to enter the Catholic Church. I was baptized Orthodox as a baby, and I grew up in the Orthodox Church, very traditional, very regimented, very holy church. And through a series of events, as my life kind of went on, I grew away from my faith and I began to question a lot of things. I got to college and I went to UCLA, and they have a Newman Center there. And conveniently for me, it was located in between two frat houses, which I was just trying to find my place to fit in. I was not looking for a relationship with the Lord. I was not looking to become Catholic. Yet I found myself intrigued when there were people in front of the Newman Center handing out flyers in the fall of 2008. Does anybody want to become a Catholic? And I was just trying to find my footing. I was a brand new freshman, and I said, I kind of like the party life. I fit in there. But let's see what these Catholics are all about. And so I spent most of my time at those frat houses, and a good portion of my time actually at the Catholic Church. And I did do the RCIA program, and I sang in the choir and got involved there. And I loved the Catholics. They filled my heart. But when I got to Easter Vigil, something happened, and the director had called me and she told me, unfortunately, you're not able to enter the church this year. We're having some paperwork issues with the Orthodox Church. They are holding up paperwork, and you can become Catholic. It's just not going to happen this year. I was not willing to wait. And unfortunately, that kind of pushed me away from religion in general. I thought, if this is what God wants, the rules and the paperwork, I want nothing to do with it. So I spent the next 4 years doing everything I wasn't supposed to be doing in college, and somehow got into a good nursing school. I went to the University of San Francisco, a Catholic Jesuit university up in San Francisco, and found my life starting to kind of unwind a bit. I was trying to find my place to fit in and was really struggling, and just a lot of things I was going through. And I lived about 2 blocks away from the university's Catholic church, and something about it lured me in. And I thought, I could try again. I could try again. Something's missing in my heart, and didn't do it for me again. I loved the church and I loved the beauty, but something about my campus and just seeing the way that things were not done in a Catholic way on a Catholic campus really pushed me away. And I felt myself leaving confused. I felt like a hypocrite. I was living a life in sin. I didn't feel like I should be in the church on Sunday. But then again, I had some moral grounding to know that what was going on campus with the curriculum and with the just the sinful things I was seeing on campus, which is not appropriate for a Catholic school. So that for me was the moment where I just walked away from religion, and I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to do life on my own terms, in my own way. And so I spent the next rest of my adult life kind of living a very secular life. Got involved in a lot of dark things, got involved in New Age practices. I basically sold my soul. And the Lord, looking back, I could see him trying to call me many, many times. And I just didn't want to hear him, didn't even know how to hear him. And so eventually I got married. I got married to a lovely Jewish man. My husband's Jewish. And we had our first child, our daughter, and my mom came to me and she said, "Will you baptize her?" And I said, we're going to raise her to be a good person. I said, I don't really want to get involved in the rules and the rituals here. They've never done anything for me other than push me away. And then she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "Will you baptize her for me?" Okay, fine. And she said, "Well, will you finally become Catholic too?" And I said, okay, fine. I guess somebody has to be Catholic if we're going to baptize our daughter in the Catholic Church. So I took my paperwork to the church in our neighborhood, and I said, "Here you go. Mom wants me to become Catholic. Can you do anything with this paperwork?" Somehow they were able to bring me in 3 months. That's how I became a Catholic. It was not it was not any spiritual conversion. It was not any spiritual reading. It was not any Holy Spirit, nothing. I was not forced. I was not coerced, but it was sheerly out of obligation. So I became a Catholic in the spring of 2018, and my daughter was baptized in June of 2018. I had never been to confession. I did not believe or even understand the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. You got to remember, a whole decade had gone by from the time that I had gone through the courses and everything. And that was a decade of being lost to the world. And so really, when I entered the church, I was very, very lost. I would go to Mass on Christmas and Easter, and I would receive communion. And I would just continue living my sinful life until the fall of 2019, when my mom came to me holding a Miraculous Medal. And she says, my friend and I, well, a dear friend of ours, a lifelong friend, she said, "We are thinking of reviving old Catholic jewelry." And I said, "That's great. That's wonderful. I'll be supportive." And she said, would you wear this Miraculous Medal?" And I said, "I don't know what that is, but I'm not really interested in that. I like my jewelry the way I like my jewelry." And I was at a really low point in my life. My life was beginning to unravel yet again. And looked me dead in the eye, and she said, "Will you wear it for me?" I said, "Okay, fine." And I put it on, and my life changed forever. Wow. That is the moment where I truly started to become a Catholic.
And that's why we call it a miraculous medal. Miracles truly do happen. They do take place when you wear that medal. And so that's a story that testifies to that.
Yeah. Yep. So Mama Mary, I put it on, and I didn't feel it's not like I put it on and all of a sudden I was just full of grace. It was not one of those things. It took a little while, but I never wanted to take it off. Something about it just magnetized itself to me. And so through ups and downs, it remained on. And then as the world was shutting down about 6 months later, and my mom and her friend were getting their little ministry up and running with the medals, I offered to help. And I said, "Listen, what can I do to help you? I said, churches are shutting down. You can't go and sell your jewelry in person, you know. I can make an Instagram page for you. It's about the most I can do, you know. And I said, but it'll just be the necklaces. I don't know any of the religious stuff. I'm not really into the religious stuff, but I can do I'll just post the necklaces for you. And that's when it really took off. Nudges from Our Lady here and there. I would see things and hear things, and that's when my mom sent me your podcast. I would fill my ears. I would fill my heart, fill my mind with things that I would encounter through social media and through different podcasts, YouTubes. And so over the last couple of years, I've pretty much, I don't want to say catechized myself, but I've learned everything that I've learned through this ministry, and by basically just through absorbing what I can. And 54-day rosary novenas, that's where I started praying the rosary, and all of that.
So the social media account is the Miraculous Revival, is that right?
Yes.
And then, well, it's a very attractive page. Like, you use the same color scheme throughout the whole thing. So I read a lot about social media, and it tells me that's what I'm supposed to do. But I'm like, I just like posting pictures. So we're just going to go with the picture style of Instagram. But anyways, the Instagram, or any social media platform for that matter, just the different ways you can use it. So one of the things popular is stories, of course, and then you can create a highlight with your story, which then allows you to save them under a theme or whatever. And I noticed as I was perusing the account that one of the themes of the stories was Marian apparitions. And there are lots of Marian apparitions. I've been to many of the different shrines myself. Maybe you've been, I'm not sure. But of course, here in Wisconsin, where I live, very close nearby, is the Shrine of Our Lady of Good Help in Champion, a Marian apparition site. But as I was looking at the apparitions, you covered one from, I think it was Venezuela, Betania, or actually, I don't know how to say it, but it's like Maria Esperanza, I think is her name. Drew Mariani, who I know through Relevant Radio. He's a big promoter of that one, for example. But there was one that you mentioned there that I just was very unfamiliar with. And it was this apparition of Our Lady Help of Christians. And I was just curious, just for my own sake, partly because I'm writing a paper on devotion to Mary as Help of Christians and giving it for the Mariological Society of America. I was curious about this apparition myself, and kind of why you were drawn to want to share or publicize or promote that one.
So this year we're taking a little pause right now as we're getting the novena up and running, but my intention was to really cover all the Vatican approved and all of the bishop approved apparitions. So we're just kind of going through each of them. And so the 4 that you saw just happened to be the 4 that we've already done. Now, Our Lady Help of Christians, it threw me off for a minute because I know that that's the title of Our Lady, and then it's also an apparition. Same thing goes for Our Lady of Sorrows. It's a title, and there's also an apparition, Our Lady of Sorrows as well. So this one was actually in 1866 in the Czech Republic. It's a small apparition. It's not very well known, but it is Vatican approved. And what I found so interesting about it, you see these huge apparitions like Fatima, and where they get a lot of publicity. And this one, Mary appeared one time to one person, and she had one message, and it was profound. She appeared to a 30-year-old named Magdalena Cade, who was very, very sick. She was deathly ill. Her doctors told her she only had 2 weeks to live. She received her last rites. And one night when she was laying down to go to sleep, she said it was dark, and she said her room got bright like light. And all of a sudden she noticed a figure. And what she said was a figure that emanated a very white light with a golden crown on its head. I quickly thought it was the Mother of God. And so she began to pray the Magnificat, part of the Magnificat prayer. And she heard audibly my child, from this moment on, you will be healed. Immediately her pain was gone. And the next morning she woke up and walked into town, and people were shocked that she was up. I mean, she hadn't been out of her house in a very long time.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing is that there was actually somebody else in the room with her who did not see Our Lady. And so, but she saw that, I mean, she saw that she got up and all of a sudden was fine. And yeah, so her room became a place of pilgrimage. And so other people would come to Magdalena's room throughout time, and they would also receive healings. They would lay on her bed and they would become healed. And so finally the bishop in the area came in and actually affirmed the supernatural character of the cure. And so after that, they built a church on the site. And then after that, in 1885, Pope Leo VIII elevated it to a minor basilica. And then when he consecrated that basilica, he dedicated it to Mary, Help of Christians.
Interesting.
Yeah, so why he chose that title, I'm not entirely sure, but that's why this particular apparition has that name.
Okay. I'm going to be looking into it.
Yeah, it was a tough one to find information on, particularly because the website, most of the websites that have the information are in Czech.
Well, sure. Yeah, there's this book. It's actually over here from where I'm sitting, but it came up from Sophia Institute Press, and it's like The World of Mary's Apparitions or something like that, by some Polish author, I think. It's like a nice coffee table book, and I'll be interested to see, because they cover some obscure ones in that book, and I wonder if maybe it's in there. So I'll have to take a look and see, and maybe I'll let you know. So. Well, that's great. Well, thanks so much for sharing about that apparition. I was just curious, and it's part of the apostolate that you're doing, that you want to share some of these Marian apparitions. Now, through the Instagram account now, you are promoting something called the Impossible Novena. So I was one of the curious seekers. I simply saw it again because somebody had shared it on their own story, and I'm like, oh, let's investigate this. And I wondered what it was about, and it looked like it was a Marian novena. I'm like, oh, I should probably know about this. And so I'm like, maybe I'll participate. And then I found out it wasn't a 9-day novena. It's a 9-month novena. And so the feast of the Annunciation is March 25th. The feast of the Incarnation, of God becoming man in the womb of the Virgin Mary, when the angel Gabriel visits Mary with this message. And so it begins on March 25th, goes to December 25th. It's the 9 months of Mary's pregnancy. And to be honest, I've never thought about marking that as a special time of prayer. And so I thought this was ingenious to do something like that, to have a devotion for the 9 months of Our Lady's for Our Lady's pregnancy and all that entails. I always think about the last weeks of Advent as being kind of the last weeks of Mary's pregnancy, but that's kind of as far as I've gone in terms of my own reflection or devotion for that. So is it called the Impossible Novena because it might be impossible to do? Because I don't know how many 9-day novenas I've started that I missed day 4 or 5. I don't know how many rosary novenas I've tried that maybe regretfully, maybe I missed a day of the rosary or something. So is it impossible in that way, or what is meant by that?
Well, okay, so I have a few disclosures here for the listeners. Number one, I've been doing my best to research the actual origin of this novena. I reached out to Catholic Answers. I reached out to the Marians over at the Divine Mercy. Apparently Father Chris Alar is working on it. I'm not sure. We're trying to figure out, Father, if you know anybody who could figure out where this novena originated, just for curiosity. I don't know why it's called that. I have some guesses as to why it could be called that, and I can definitely share why I feel it might be impossible. I actually I attempted it last year, and I am one of the ones who I was not able to complete it. And so
How long did
I
you get into it? Were you 3 months in and you weren't able to complete it, or was it just a few weeks, or what?
3 weeks.
Okay.
Um, and I'm an all or nothing person. I mean, I have no problem. I've done 54-day rosary novenas. I've done Marian consecrations every year. Like when I go for something, I go for it. And this is a shorter prayer. It's not even, I think if I had to really dig deep and think about why it was so challenging for me, yes, impossible because of the duration, right? You have that element. I think what makes, oh, and also to the fact that you're bringing three impossible causes. You're bringing three requests to Our Lady to then take to our Lord, which you believe to be hard, impossible, hopeless, things that you just feel like, man, I've been bringing this to prayer, and it just feels like there's no solution. It feels impossible. Um, and I think the reason that this particular prayer is hard, yeah, it's a shorter prayer. It's only 10 or 15 minutes. But you can't get lost meditating in the mysteries of the rosary. You can't get lost meditating in anything else. You are focused on those three intentions. And they are hard intentions, especially if you're bringing something painful. And so I think that for me, that meditating on the three things that were causing me a lot of grief at that particular time in my life without having the spiritual grounding, number one, and number two, not really having that sense of community to keep me moving. I gave up. I had another friend doing it with me, and she did it for me. She actually prayed the entire 9-month novena for me, for my intentions, and I am still bearing fruit and experiencing miracles from her prayer. But it was very hard to meditate on the three most difficult things in my life. So that's why we're leaning on Mary's virtues this year, because we need a lot of grace to be able to do that.
So when I pray this novena, let's say I know someone, they've been trying to have a baby, for example, and they've had 2 or 3 miscarriages. Can I include them? Could they be one of my impossible? It seems like this is impossible for them. Or is this like specifically meant just for me as the prayer? So I'm not doing it for someone, I'm not lifting up an intention for someone else. It's supposed to be for me. Like, how should the intention, what kind of way should that be focused, I guess?
Just again, I can't really speak from experience with this novena. I think experience just with, I've done the 54-day a lot of times with, very specific intentions. I think intentions, whatever the Holy Spirit is calling you to, my intentions for this year are for other people.
Okay.
But because I'm praying for other people, I mean, they are still dear to me, right? It's
Hmm.
still something that matters to me. My friend prayed for me last year. I think it's good to pray for other people. And I think it's also good to pray for yourself. I think that's going to be a very individual thing. So sometimes the needs of others are what weigh on us the most. And sometimes it's our own needs that weigh on us the most. And we kind of just have to take that to prayer. But I think both are valid.
So then, how did you come to hear of this? So you don't necessarily, as you mentioned, know the exact origins of it, and you're trying to trace that, but obviously you came to know about this type of a novena, this idea of keeping holy the 9 months of Mary's pregnancy with special prayers. So where was it, or how was it that you learned about it?
Um, well, so last spring, I went on a podcast with Stephanie Engelman. She has a podcast called the Glorify Podcast. And I had been listening to her podcast, and she briefly mentioned it. Well, not briefly. She actually talked about her testimony with it, and I was intrigued by it at the time, and I just kind of thought about it and then moved on. I didn't. It wasn't something where I was like, man, I need to do that novena, but it planted a little seed. But then last year, when my friend reached out and she said, "Hey, would you like to do the Walk of the Incarnation, the Impossible Novena?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." It That was when I really, really heard of it, because she really started explaining it to me. She sent me the prayers, because we were going to be doing it together, and then I fell off the bandwagon and she stayed on it. Um, and then I think for me, it was just seeing how fruitful the prayer really was, and just seeing her dedication throughout the whole thing, and how even when my life was a mess last year, I mean, the intention she was praying for, like everything that could have gone completely opposite to that prayer intention happened last year. Like my life completely unraveled. And so, and she never stopped praying. She always just kept saying, God's will be done, God's will be done. And I did get that answer to prayer, and it came in like the most crazy of ways. But it really sparked something in me to think, man, there is something about this prayer.
Now, you just mentioned another name for it. Not only is it called the Impossible Novena, but you mentioned the Walk of the Incarnation. So, what does that mean? Of course, kind of the incarnation being the fact that Jesus becomes man. That God invisible becomes incarnate, becomes visible in the Christ child and in his life as he advances and grows in wisdom. But what's meant by kind of the totality of that statement, the walk of the incarnation?
So this prayer, you're really supposed to be walking with Mary as she walks on her journey through her pregnancy. That's kind of like my understanding of what this novena is supposed to be. And I've actually read in different places that you are invited to walk while you pray. And so me being the clumsy type, I'm like, man, I'm going to be falling over because I'm going to have to be reading this for a while. So we do have audio prayers coming for our participants to be able to listen and pray and walk as if they'd like to. But it really is, I think the term walking, it kind of gives us a visual for a journey, right? That you're moving in motion. It's not a stagnant prayer. It's not a prayer that you're just reciting every day for the sake of recitation and hoping to achieve some kind of result. You really are in motion, walking and moving and progressing, and growing with Mary's womb, and also walking toward the ultimate goal of growing closer to Jesus and to Jesus through Mary.
Now, what does a person do if they want to complete the novena? So you have a website, you have an email list people can subscribe to. And so through that, you are transmitting prayers, right? So are they the same prayers for the entire 9 months? Do the prayers change with each week or each month? Like, what does a person do if they say, I want to do this 9 month of prayer?
So really if they want to just do it and make it super simple, all they need is to print out the prayers and they can go on their merry way and they'd be good. It's the same prayer every single day for 9 months.
Oh,
It
wow.
doesn't change. It doesn't change. So that's nice because it's not like you have a different, mystery each day. Then you switch from, petition to Thanksgiving. It's the same every day. Now what we're trying to offer, and what we feel that Our Lady is really calling us to, just with the way that it all came together, is to provide a more of an experience in a way, so that it doesn't just become the rote recitation of the prayer. Because I think that if we allow ourselves to just become so focused on the intention itself, what'll happen to me last year, where you become just so overwhelmed by the intention that you kind of get overwhelmed and maybe fall off the bandwagon. So what we really want to do is bring to life a different virtue of Mary every single month of her pregnancy. So from the 25th to the 24th, we'll go through each of the 10, each virtue in a different way. Bringing that type of content through YouTube, through Instagram, through the emails. And in addition to the virtues, again, just really focusing on her pregnancy, we're going to be posting stories. So we're going to have a dynamic approach so that people who have different ways that can draw them in, all they need are the prayers. If they want more, it'll be available. They can sign up if they want to get the emails. They can follow along on Instagram. I am working with another friend. Her name is Glory. She's on Gloriously Catholic on YouTube and Instagram. And she will also be putting out content as well and doing all the audio prayers too.
Okay. Well, that's very cool. And I subscribed, I put in my email address somewhere. How many people are you anticipating are going to be doing this Impossible Novena Walk of the Incarnation? Granted, you can have so many people sign up. You could have hundreds or thousands of people sign up, but then, how many people will actually finish it? Probably a different question, but I would just go with maybe like your anticipated reach right now in terms of the novena.
Well, this one is different than anything we've done in the past. The 54 days that we've done on our page in the past, we've usually gotten a couple hundred people. We're now at about 1,200 people
That's wonderful.
signed up. So it's just beautiful confirmation that maybe this is what Our Lady had requested. So
And you just think 1,200 people, and hopefully everybody finishes. That would be my hope, my prayer. Of course, maybe some won't. That's fine. But all the grace that is going to be poured out, even if a person just does it for a week and then they stop. Well, just in those 7 days, those prayers were still efficacious. And so that's something that we can't forget either. So, yeah, that's very powerful to think all of these people join together in prayer for their own impossible petitions. So you take 1,000 people times that by three intentions. That's 3,000 intentions that we're storming heaven for. So there's something beautiful about that, and that there's going to be grace. St. Bernard of Clairvaux, he writes that Mary is an aqueduct, that she's always flowing with grace, and that grace overflows to us, and we're able to receive and tap into that aqueduct. And really, I think that's what something like this is. Like, here we are, we're going to this fountain of grace, and we're hoping to receive from it as we make our prayers, as we make our petitions.
yeah. And like you said, even if they don't complete it, grace can still flow from that. Look what the Lord used my failure last year to do this year, So you never know what can come from even efforts that don't come fully through.
So is this something that you think might become a yearly devotion for you? That every March 25th to December 25th, Christmas Day, that you're always going to keep holy these 9 months? Or is this like one of those devotions you do it once and then maybe you don't repeat it for years or for some time later?
Father, that's a wonderful question. I never even planned on doing this. This was not, I resisted this call for a long time. And so to even be doing it this year is, I mean, I can't believe that this is happening still.
Well,
And so to see it all coming together, I imagine now that we have everything set up, that if people want to do it again next year, we would continue.
yeah, well, that's wonderful. Yeah, I just kind of think, for example, I did this reading of The Mystical City of God by Maria of Agreda, 365. So right now it's just repeating itself. I'm not re-recording. I just have the files. I just release them every day, in year two. So that's another cycle. So maybe someone doesn't do it next year, but then if you do it, well, then you have a new clientele in a sense, or new people you're able to reach through it. So yeah, wonderful, a wonderful project, and really for you to say yes. Mary at the Annunciation gives her fiat. She says, Let it be done to me according to your word." And really, as we do this, for you, it's an act of surrender. Mary surrendered herself to the will of God. And so for us, as we enter into that, it's almost as if we're saying, well, let your will be done. Let God's will be done. I surrender now as I give these three petitions to your intercession. So I'm really looking forward to it. It might be just exactly what my spiritual life might need for 9 months. So yeah, looking forward to the emails, and people can check out your website. You have a website for it, right? Called impossiblenovena.com. So people can head on over there. They can find you on Instagram, and they can see all this content. So tell me a little bit more about the shop too. So you set up this Instagram page. It's a lot about antique metals, maybe, or something like that. So people can buy a medal too. Is that a real thing?
That's how we started. I mean, yes. So my mom and her friend Michelle, they go hunting for vintage and
Mm.
antique Catholic medals. It started off as just miraculous medals. Then they started finding scapulars and saint medals and different things. And so, yeah, they clean them. Some of them take a lot of time to clean, and then put them on new chains. And each piece is different. And so,
And people buy that through like Etsy or through, is there a storefront? How do they buy those?
we post a new necklace every day, other than Sunday, and we have a shop link at the top of our bio,
Okay.
um, on Instagram, and so you just go up to the shop and whatever, you can just see what's left in our shop and go from there.
Interesting. Very good. What's your biggest hope for the next 9 months?
My goodness, I just hope that Our Lady will continue to give me the grace to be the best, littlest instrument that I can be.
Sure. That's great. Well, Ellie, I know this is going to be a blessed work. And a lot of times when we resist something, or maybe we're like, why am I doing this? Those are the projects that really God rewards us for, I think. And so I think you're going to notice just your friend last year completing the novena on your behalf. And this year, now you leading so many others. I think there's going to be a lot in store for you, a lot of good gifts that the Most High is going to shower upon you.
Oh, well, thank you, Father. And I think, honestly, I know I'm not trying to gush here, but yeah, being on here with you too is a huge gift and a huge grace to me. I never imagined that I'd get to have this conversation. So I think you're the only priest signed up. And so it's very touching. So
Well, that's great to hear. Well, maybe more priests will sign up here in the next week or so. You mentioned being a longtime listener now of How They Love Mary and whatnot, and I love talking to people like that. So I did a show maybe last year. It was like the super fan show where they were the #1 listener on Spotify or whatever. So I'm just curious, like, there's been over 200 episodes now, 200 interviews or 200 individual episodes outside of bonus content. And I know this is on the spot. Any interviews stick out to you that I did that really was one of your favorites, or maybe was something that really maybe sparked a new thought, or I don't know, just curious about any past episode make a impression on you.
I loved the one about Garabandal. I loved it.
Okay. Oh
I
yeah.
loved it. It actually kind of really inspired me to start the Marian apparition.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
okay, I'd be lying. It inspired my mom, who inspired me. I told you everything comes through my mom. She listened to it and then she said, Did you hear Father Looney's talk on Garabandal? I said, I did. And she said, you should talk about apparitions on your page. And of course, I resist every nudge that I ever get. And I was like, no, 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 like, we're not going to do that. So yeah, then earlier this year, she's like, you should talk to see if Father Looney can help you with the apparitions. I was like, no, 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 he's busy. So, but yeah, so that one, I love Carabindal, the prophecies, and then watching what's going on in the world and everything. I'm all
Sure.
about that.
Yeah, of course, Karen Bedell is not a Vatican approved apparition,
No.
not a bishop approved apparition. So you probably won't be featuring it if that's your criteria. But yeah, I just I credit a lot to Garen Bendall in 2020 in my own life. Like there were some days being a priest is tough, like and seeing what's going on in the world or maybe even within the church. And so Garabandal like was kind of like a spark of hope for me, that Our Lady talked about what we're experiencing in the world or in the church. And so I almost say like sometimes that Garabandal saved my vocation. And so I was there. I went to Garabandal last year. I was there, and I'll tell you, praying at the Pines. I've been to Marian apparitions all over the world. I've been to Guadalupe, Lourdes, Bahrain, Bano, Fatima. I've been everywhere. There's a few, of course, I haven't been to, but uh, outside of Lourdes, where I could pray at the grotto for hours, like the great. I'm writing a new book called well, it's about holy places and graces received at them, like personally, and so as a way kind of for us to reimagine the way that we visit holy places and like asking for particular graces. And so I write about Garabandal, which the publisher will probably cut out of the book because it's an unapproved apparition. But I write about the grace to remain. And just like I wanted to remain in prayer there. Like there were days I was there, it was raining, and I'm like, I don't care that it's raining. I just want to sit here with Our Lady. Like I never experienced such a profound peace in all my life than praying at the Pines in Garamandal. So yeah, so it is a very powerful place. So yeah, I had 2 episodes on Garamandal, one with Glenn Hudson, who I think is probably the premier English scholar on the apparitions. He's dedicated really his whole life to promoting Garamandal and the message. He lives on Facebook. He's got literally, like, if there was an address for Facebook, he'd live there. But he runs like 15 pages about Garamandal in multiple languages and shares content every day, translates all that. So, and then I talked to Ed Kelly about his own experience of Garamandal, and I spoke with him in person while I was in Spain myself. So, anyways, well, that's wonderful. And yeah, I was just curious, kind of, if there were any episodes. So that's great. Well, it's been wonderful to speak with you, Ellie, and to talk about this 9-month novena,
Yeah,
the
thank you.
Impossible Novena. And I'm going to start it, and I hope to finish it. And we'll have to check back in later and see how it went for all of us.
I think you're going to do great. I think there's definitely grace in numbers. And like I said, I wouldn't even be doing this if it weren't for the nudges of friends and just so I think if we all motivate each other and keep each other going, it's going to be very fruitful.
And why don't you just give us all of your little contacts, website, Instagram handle, etc., right here as we close out.
Sure. So you can find me at miraculous_revival on Instagram. And then the website for our novena is www.impossiblenovena.com. And those are the 2 main places right now.
Well, wonderful. Thanks so much for your time, Ellie. And I know that your mom, who's a fan of the show, she's watching your kids right now as you're doing and recording this interview.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thanks so much for being with me today.
All right. Thank you so much, Father.